Thank you so much for coming on. So if you could start with the presentation, and then we can proceed to some questions afterwards.
Sure. Let me just give everyone just a little bit of an overview of what we're doing. Forgive me, I'll go over to PowerPoint for a second here. Okay, so our company makes AI software that gives a voice and intelligence to other people's products. So far, we've worked with friends who build cars, robots, health systems, digital signage, all sorts of different things. And we do it in a little different way than Siri and Alexa that you may be more familiar with. First of all, things like Siri only understand part of what you say. With our system, we understand up to 99% of what people say to our assistants. Uh, those other systems were built to capture and sell data. We don't do any of that. We wear the white hat and keep our conversations with people private. We don't need to run on a supercomputer. They do. We can run on something as small as a wristwatch or your phone. Other major systems support a few languages. We support 40, allowing us to reach a wide worldwide audience. And we're white label, so it's not all about our product. It's about making our customers look good with the voice systems that we add to their products. So far, we've worked in a number of different spaces, including building systems for cars. Our newest area is digital signage, and that's mostly what I'm going to be talking about today, because I see a lot of wonderful places for our assistants to be brand ambassadors or to inform or guide people in retail settings, train stations, airports, all sorts of places where guide characters are useful. We've also worked in the smart home space, developing systems for companies like NEC and Yamaha and Samsung. And we've even done some fun things in healthcare, doing things like assistance to teach people about health topics, to be able to provide an interface to doctors to supplement them and to monitor patients 24/7. Even working with seniors to give assistance that can provide companionship and at the same time monitor their cognitive abilities. So that's what we're up to. And with that, let me stop the screen share and turn things over to Daniel.
Thank you for that, David. You're better able to describe what SapientX does than I am. So could you tell us, I'll start with a very basic question. Could you define conversational AI for us?
Well, so to define conversational AI, let me talk a tiny bit about the history of things. These voice systems began as telephone systems, just to um, conduct simple kind of questions such as yes or no, or do you want for number for sales, press number one, or say number one. For accounting, press number two, or say number two. So they were very, very basic in their capabilities. Uh, the very first versions of Siri and Alexa started out with those IVR systems, and they sought to extend them and make them more capable. Uh, but they were still really focused on question answering, or very simple tasks like playing music for you, or telling me a joke, or answering trivia questions. We began our work long ago, with the notion that the future of computing was going to be based on people speaking conversationally to their products, their technology products that surround themselves. That could be anything from your car to your washer and dryer, and that if you could speak conversationally to those things in your life, those technology products, that you would never have to learn commands. Well, so it turns out that that was a pretty good assumption, because here we are today, and now making conversational interfaces for products is all the rage, except a lot of the old older products just don't really fill the bill. And that's one of the reasons why their accuracy is so low. Even companies like Google, who everybody figures has the best of everything, in third-party testing, they still have an error rate that only delivers 88% accuracy. If you are driving in your car and you ask for the window to be lowered, you need to have that happen reliably every single time. You can't have an error rate in there where things don't work properly. So that's where we come in, and we're able to deliver higher accuracy systems that really truly serve the needs of our customers.
Can you explain what's the cause of that divergence between Google or Apple's Alexa and their voice recognition, versus yours, which has 99% voice recognition? Is it it's technically superior on the back end, or could you explain for a non-technical person why your service is better for actually recognizing what people are saying?
Sure. Well, first of all, let me say that those are perfectly good systems, and they do good tasks for people, but they are largely solving different problems. Friends of mine started the Alexa smart speaker program here in Santa Cruz, and their goal was pretty simple, and that was to deliver music and answer basic questions for people, such as what's the weather going to be like tomorrow, or set a kitchen timer for me. And largely, those systems work pretty well at that. We're geared for doing something totally different, being able to not only serve narrow functions like that, we call that narrow domain functions, but also to have broad domain functions served, including general conversation. We think having a social interface to an appliance or a car is a really useful thing. A friend of mine in Boston was the head of the Jibo robot company. Brian Eberman guided the technology for that robot, and after they had sold them for a while, they started analyzing the user logs and found out that 60% of all conversation with those little robots was purely conversational, such as how's it going, what's the weather like today, all those sorts of things that are similar to how you interact with a friend. So that was really revealing for Brian and his team. And I think once I heard that myself, it kind of validated our gut feeling that having a personable assistant that had character and interacted with you like a friend was not just useful in terms of never having to learn commands, but it was also useful because human beings need to socialize. And once you realize that a computer has social capabilities, people tend to talk to it. Imagine yourself on a long drive and you're all by yourself and you have somebody to talk to. You will. I talk to my cat. So far, she's never answered back, but if you had a cat that could answer back, that'd be a pretty cool thing, huh?
And
By the
I
way,
think
we are working on a talking cat.
say it again.
By the way, we are working on a talking cat for
Is
seniors.
that the next avatar?
Yes, it is.
Well, on that note, you on the SapientX websites, you guys have written about the kind of the problems with chatbots in the past and the kind of the failure of some chatbot companies. And can you speak about the sort of trajectory from more simplistic, maybe automated phone answering systems to chatbots in terms of the scaling up of the intelligence capabilities on one end on the technical side, but also the interface element of like hearing a human voice and having a conversational tone to it, and seeing an avatar versus talking to a chat bot or to talking to an automated phone answering kind of system. Can you speak to that kind of broader evolution and
Yeah.
why it's so important to have this human element?
So there's kind of two themes in there. First is the first chatbot came out in 1966, and chatbot software was put into open source in the 80s. And you could build simple conversational systems. They weren't very good, and they were like if you said the right keyword, it would trigger a response. Almost all those early systems were text based, but later they started adding a voice to them. And the reason there so many chatbot companies got started was they were able to take a lot of this open source stuff that worked, but it didn't work very well. And the reason so many of those companies went out of business was they started using them for things like customer support. And if you already have an irate person who's asking for customer support and the voice system makes them even more irate, that's not a good thing. So those customer experiences were not high quality. And consequently, a lot of those companies failed to get new customers. Uh, it's important to have high accuracy in understanding people to provide not just a high quality experience, but also an entertaining and useful one. Uh, there have been a lot of research studies in recent times that sought to answer the question of should we put an avatar uh, along with a voice? And the answer is for a lot of cases, yes. The National Highway Traffic Safety Council studied voice systems and found that the more human like the voice, the more entertaining it was, the quicker that people understood directions, such as using a voice for a navigation system, and hence that it was safer to drive in the car. Other studies tested users with and without an avatar and found up to 25% higher user satisfaction and trust if an avatar was together with a voice. So that's really important. And while we're an AI company and we don't make avatars, we want to make it really easy for our customers to use avatars. So we've developed the AI glue between avatar systems and our voice system that work with popular game engines, web-based graphics, all different kind of existing standardized systems within the animation industry to develop talking characters. So you see one over my shoulder right now. That is an avatar system called MetaHumans, released by Epic a year ago. It's part of their game system. And it's one of the easiest ways for people to add an avatar and a voice as an interface to either their product or to help sell or market something. So this is a new area for us, and it's really been some powerlifting in recent years for us to accomplish this. It actually began with Alex Hessler leaving Pixar and joining our team 5 years ago. So we've been hard at work on that, and we first began showing it last fall. Now we're in wonderful conversations with people who want to use it for retail or airports or showrooms, things like that. So this is a whole new area for us, where all of a sudden we're going from the small screen to a very large screen. And I've got to tell you, it's really exciting. There's so much detail in these characters, and they're so realistic. You can see things like the little hairs in their eyebrows. There's so much there.
And I think having someone from Pixar is perfect in terms of capturing in a an animated way what are quite human features or real features. I guess on that point, the metaverse has blown up in the last 2 years. I think before 2020, most people had probably never heard the term. I know that's not the case for you. Could you tell us a bit about your own personal journey with the metaverse professionally and as a concept and as a sort of not necessarily an ideal, but as something to be built by kind of future minded technologists and their friends and kind of colleagues.
Well, first of all, let me make it clear what the metaverse is. A lot of people don't actually know, and partly it's because a lot of people in the press don't know, and they write about this is the metaverse and that's the metaverse. The metaverse started out of the science fiction writing of books like Snow Crash by Neil Stevenson, where they described in their science fiction a virtual world that you could go to using a headset or some other display thing, and you would be in a virtual space. You would see your friends as avatars in that space, and you could interact with them. That's a real simple, useful definition today of what a metaverse is. Now, my earlier team, Planet Nine Studios, actually long ago, more than 25 years ago, uh, with some of our hacker friends in San Francisco, created the first 3D metaverses online. And it was very early and very primitive back then, but we started creating virtual places and little avatars running around. And in the very earliest days, they could just text chat with each other. And then later, they added a voice component, and magic started happening. Now, the metaverse has gone through quite a few incarnations over the years, and it's not something new that just popped out of the box. It's been an evolutionary process. Now, one of the exciting things for us is having talking characters in the metaverse that can be AI powered is a very useful thing. The very first one back in 1996 was Dusty the Dustbin. He was a little vacuum cleaner that would come up to talk to you inside a Black Sun's Point world, and that literally was the first sales bot in a metaverse setting. And that's one thing. That's one version of how to use these talking characters. But there's a whole lot of other uses. We have friends that run museums, and they want to have these characters be docents to guide people through virtual versions of their museums or their art galleries. That's pretty cool. We've also talked with people that had challenges with vision or hearing, and were able to have guide characters that can help them have a good experience in spite of maybe not hearing well or seeing well. So there's a lot of different exciting ways to use these new characters that we've been building for the metaverse, including at the end of this month, we'll be showing our first characters that work inside of Apple's or in Real's glasses, so that you can literally be walking outside and put a pair of glasses on and see one of our characters and have them interact with you. Now, it's going to be strange because people will think you're talking to yourself, but you'll be having a good experience, hopefully.
And it's sort of thinking of all the possible use cases for, AI kind of backed talking avatars. It sort of boggles the mind in a way. There's so many different applications that they can be used for. And you answered, or somewhat answered, a question that I'd wanted to ask, because you've written about the influence of William Gibson's Neuromancer and Neil Stephenson's Snow Crash. Can you talk a bit about science fiction and the power that it has for kind of kindling the imagination in someone that's interested in technology, intersection of technology and humanity? Because I think it's very common for people who are working in the space to kind of refer to those or kind of similar texts and ideas when they're talking about their motivations. Could you tell us a little bit about your personal relationship with those books and with science fiction more generally?
So I'm the old guy in the room. I was born in 1958, and when I was a little boy, I would see things on TV, or or sometimes I'd go to a place like Disneyland and I'd see an animatronic Lincoln talking to people. And when you've never seen anything like that ever before, it's just magic. And your imagination spirals when you start seeing these things, and you start dreaming about a wonderful future where you can talk to robots or talk to characters. And it starts feeding your imagination and building your creative desire to build these things. Later, there were movies, seminal movies like Blade Runner, where central characters in the movie are essentially fancy robots that you can interact with. Now, these were kind of bad robots, but it was a cool movie anyway, and it made us want to build out the vision of some of the books like Neuromancer and Snow Crash. They very much excited us about the possibility of what we could do with this technology. And I have good friends that write science fiction books. Our first CTO actually was a science fiction writer, Nicole Salick Anderson. She's a great writer, and built with us a new kind of narrative where you can interact with her Alara character who lives 100 years from now on Mars, and you can become part of her story and have a branching storyline that's built around your interaction with a character. How cool is that? It's like a whole new type of storytelling where you're part of the story.
And I think, in a way, video games have kind of given us a glimpse of where we're going in terms of narrative and storytelling and fiction, in a way that, like, and especially with the metaverse and having kind of virtual avatars, visual representations of ourselves, kind of separate selves that we control that we have some, we identify with. With regards to SapientX's kind of origins and your own kind of motivations, I know that you and the other founders were friends before you founded the company. Could you tell us a little bit about the sort of prehistory of SapientX and how the idea kind of came about between yourself and your co-founders?
Uh, Yes, SapientX was co-founded by myself and Bruce Wilcox. Bruce headed AI at a number of important game companies over the years, and Macklin Marvitt. Macklin and his team put one of the very first metaverses online with their company Worlds Inc. And I remember one of the coolest things they did was with the Starbright Foundation for sick kids in hospitals to have virtual experiences. And they found that it was very helpful in getting them to socialize and feel better about their illness. And these are very cool beginnings. Bruce's work is the cornerstone of what we did. And for fun, Bruce likes to compete in something called the Loebner Prize, which he's won 4 times. It's a test of the Turing test, trying to make characters that fool judges into thinking they're real human beings. And he's won it 4 times. That's pretty cool. Um, Bruce also helped a game company before we started SapientX called Outfit 7, who built the Talking Tom and Talking Angela apps for kids on iPhones, and these were such popular applications. They were little talking kitty cats that kids could converse with. They had 65 million downloads of this. So, what a wonderful thing! What a wonderful way to use a voice interface to entertain people.
And as you've teamed up with SapientX, how did you guys over time kind of develop the business model and the strategy? Because there are a lot of acquisitions in the space, but you guys have wanted to forge your own path. You're raising money externally. How do you kind of navigate this kind of what is a very emergent kind of evolving landscape, as you said, in terms of figuring out the path the business was going to take?
So I guess I'm the business guy in the group, and I realized early on there were a lot of fun things that we could do with the technology. Uh, there's certainly tools that we provide that creative people can take and run with, but there is also an important business case to be made by giving the technology in a way that people in large companies that are building products could make use of voice technologies that we were developing. So that's really been our focus. Since we started, we've worked with about 30 companies on prototype systems. Once again, everything from voice assistants within cars sitting in your dashboard to talking character voices inside of robots to silly things like we have characters working in wristwatches. Not that anybody uses wristwatches anymore, but we're able to run on very simple platforms like that and put a voice in sometimes unexpected places. You have to understand the big systems all run on supercomputers and require the internet. After all, they only exist to harvest user data and sell that. Since that's not part of our business model, we can work online or offline and be a voice in pretty much any kind of product these days.
And I had wanted to ask you about the bigger ones that kind of exist for the purpose of data collection, Siri, Alexa. You've described SapientX as a white hat company. I guess I have this two-part question. First, could you describe this white hat, black hat distinction that is quite important within hacker culture for our audience, so they understand what you mean by that? And could you also just elaborate a bit more on your own views or SapientX views on data privacy and why that's you've chosen to take a different path than these companies that have developed these technologies for data collection purposes?
Well, in our very earliest days, we came out of the hacker community in San Francisco, and it was a very giving, nurturing community that uh, had strong ethics in general. And I think that was kind of our early background and how we saw the world that we can build products that make money, but at the same time do things in a way that we consider the right or ethical way, including not doing things like collecting user data and selling it. Uh, we can build perfectly good business models around the ethical consideration of the use of AI without ever creating Skynet or creating AI systems that that abuse the trust that we develop with the people who use these voice systems as interfaces. And in hacker culture, that means wearing the white hat. And we think there's a lot of people out there wearing the black hat right now. Now there's a new wave coming of people that are demanding that the AI systems that become part of their lives uh, wear the white hat. It's especially strong in Europe right now, where they've created laws. GDPR rules are forcing AI companies to act in ways that respect user data and user privacy. We have some of them here in this country, here in the US, particularly around the medical world. But gradually, I think that we're all going to need to work within a strongly ethical framework to develop these systems that people can rely on and trust. That that it's not going to abuse the relationship that we develop with them. That's really important because part of our customization is learning about a user to better serve them, not to rip them off.
and not to commoditize their data in a way that is, and I think goes against the sort of ethical principles that you're describing. Do you feel like there is something of lost innocence from the days of the 90s when the internet was quite new and hacker culture was sort of a new kind of emergent phenomenon, attracting a lot of kind of smart, talented people? But then over the last 20 years, kind of big tech companies and major platforms have really commercialized the internet and kind of, modes of social exchange online that could have been designed and structured in a way that serve the interest of users first and foremost, as opposed to shareholders or, companies that are collecting data. Given that you've been in this world for a long time, I think myself and I think other people who are younger and a bit newer to this space and who weren't around in the 90s, I find that history really fascinating. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts on how things have changed and whether there's maybe now an opportunity to kind of take back some power from kind of big commercial firms that have moved away from these kind of more idealistic principles.
There was a time when the big social media groups like Facebook and LinkedIn struggled with the fact that they didn't have revenue models. It's odd to think about that, but uh, one of my old friends and one of my part of our old team were the early people at LinkedIn. Our- Um, we also had friends that were the founders of Twitter, and I probably had some of the very first accounts. I didn't know what to do with them at the time. Twitter, when there was only 20 people with Twitter accounts, wasn't very interesting. It only got so over time. But they all struggled in the early days with how to make a living from a system that started out with social good in mind of connecting people. And I think they all, in fairness, started with good intentions, but they had also raised a lot of money and had to start generating strong revenues to keep investors involved in those companies. So that's where they started, in my view, crossing lines that maybe should have been more strongly defined. Um, I'm enough of a libertarian to believe that government isn't going to solve all of our problems, and shouldn't be creating rules for guiding companies in all cases. But now it's gone so much the other direction where they're so strongly monetizing your posting of a photo that you just had uh, at a family birthday party, or you connecting with an old friend that you haven't seen since high school. They're using that data in ways that I find very frightening. I downloaded my Facebook data. There's 250 data fields about in there, of everything under the sun about me. Um, and that concerns me. I had somebody on my Facebook page Person was a Nazi that I didn't know. He posted something on my Facebook page, so it showed up in my Facebook record. This association with this Nazi person. That's frightening to me, and it's something that I'm not happy with. So I tend not to use social media platforms. I wish there was a good alternative out there, and perhaps it'll take people that are younger, starting newer platforms, to put that white hat on and do things uh, that reinforce communities rather than divide communities, as we're seeing so much in recent times. Um, Now, that's all lofty talk, but we are razor focused on developing strong revenues for people who choose to invest in our company. We're careful about how we build our products to not abuse trust with users, and it's a fine balancing act. Um, we have drawn lines in the sand, though, and we're staying on what we think is the good side of the line right now.
And I think the challenge that you guys have, you can in a sense see the mistakes that have been made by the major social networks in terms of misusing user data or using it for their own kind of commercial purposes. And I think that there's a lot of these kind of sentiments. A lot of people involved in the crypto world, in the world of Web3, are kind of saying, hey, we maybe need to rebuild social media as we know it from scratch in order to kind of make sure that these principles are sort of baked in to the infrastructure and that things don't go in the direction that they have with with Facebook and bigger tech companies. You could argue that maybe one of the reasons why these companies have gone down that path is because they took capital early on. They needed to kind of provide for their investors, as any firm does. And I know that SapientX is doing a fundraising round now. Could you tell us a little bit about why you guys are raising, who you're looking to raise money from, and your general attitude about bringing in investors into the company?
Well, so it turns out that our investor network began 4 years ago. We had gotten frustrated in talking with our friends who were venture capitalists who would often say to a startup, yes, we invest in early startups, but the reality is that's not actually very often true. They want to know about you early on to put you on a tracking sheet so they can study the marketplace and see who all the key players are as they're developing. But the reality is that VCs rarely will fund an early stage company, a startup. Uh, because we're having difficulty with that, Patty on our board suggested that we try something which was kind of new at the time, and that was crowdfunding. Our first crowdfunding raise was with Seed Invest, and we raised about 450,000 through small investors who believed in the vision of what we were doing, and it helped us get our company going. When uh, COVID hit and the chip shortage in the auto industry, we realized we needed to raise money again to keep our company on track and developing and keep our team together through what we thought at the time was about a 1 to 2 year period of COVID. So we raised another $850,000 this time through WeFunder, another great crowdfunding platform. Uh, COVID's clearly not completely left us, even though many of us have pulled our masks off. Uh, there are bright spots in the economy, but there are still a number of supply chain issues that are keeping our automotive customers still in the weeds. They can't get enough parts to ship enough cars out there, so they've had to pull in their coat strings and stop things like R&D activities that we participate in, trying to displace existing voice systems that don't work very well. They would love to replace those systems with things that work better, but they need R&D budgets to do that. So we realized that the world wasn't completely recovered, and so we began a third round of fundraising. And it's really gratifying to see a number of our old investors have come back to us and have re-upped. We also have a number of new investors. Some of them, I saw one fellow who had invested 4 times with us in the past 2 months. I don't know if we're his lotto ticket, but maybe we're a little bit like that for him because he keeps investing in us over and over again. Uh, it's wonderful, and it allows us to cut the strings with the traditional old school investment cycle. And there are many wonderful VCs out there who help companies and help them to achieve their highest orbit. There's also, you hear the stories of the bad ones that are really there just to take control and seize ownership of the company from young inventors and deprive them of a good return for all of their hard work in developing these companies. So we've been able to cut that string and work directly with investors who believe in where we're going. And it's an important thing that they help us with. And in return, we have to honor their faith in us by working very hard to make this a strong investment for them. So it's a great ecosystem that's developed.
And I think that the dynamic you described with VCs, there's an element, with good and bad VCs, there's an element whereby founders shape their company or shape their vision to fit with what they think VCs want, which may not be aligned with what they actually want to build or what the sort of goals or principles they want to kind of enact with their company. But I think having sort of crowdsourced funding, it allows people to buy a vision. And if it's a company that's not yet generating revenue, but they like the idea, they like the leadership, they like the team, they like the space that it's in, I think it's a great tool for founders in general. Have you had a lot of engagement with people who invest in the company, like reaching out to you? I know that there's different kind of tiers for people who invest in terms of access to yourself and to other members of the SapientX team. Have you had a pretty strong kind of community engagement from people so far?
It's been amazing, Daniel, because we have people that maybe invested $1,000 with us, but they truly see themselves as part of our team, and we really encourage that. My commitment to them is if they email me that I will get back to them within 24 hours. Uh, you'd be surprised at how many investors have written me and said, I think my company could use your products. Can I make introductions? My friend works over here at ABC Company. Can I connect you with them? I'm a doctor. We have a lot of doctors that are investors that have turned into coaches and mentors for us, saying, here's how you can build effective voice systems for the health market. These are wonderful things that we didn't see coming, and and it's because we treat our investors as part of our team, and we give them good information about what we're doing and value the input, and it's very helpful for our company. So that's a pretty cool thing that's happened.
And it has this kind of amazing network effect where people, I'm an investor and I have a lot of smart friends whose businesses may be, a perfect client for you guys. And this kind of connects things in a way that without that sort of fundraising mechanism would kind of be impossible.
Yeah, and if you think about that, that was one of the historical pluses that the venture community liked to advertise, that they would make connections to you and help accelerate the growth of your company. Uh, what I didn't realize that it could happen on a micro scale with smaller investors as well, because they want to see us succeed. They want to see their investment grow, and if they can put their finger on the scale and help us to do that. Um, well, it makes sense, and they are doing that.
Mhm. I would imagine in the early days of venture capital, VCs were distinguishing themselves from more institutional investors who didn't have the time or the energy to really kind of work with companies. But now, a lot of VCs, their portfolios are so huge, they still don't have the time to invest in their own companies. So now, this sort of, like you said, this kind of micro funding model really kind of changes the game in a very exciting way. I think for founders and for people who are observing the space. So we only have a few minutes left, so I wanted to conclude with a few kind of general questions. We talked a bit about science fiction, and I think especially for these kind of futurist kind of topics, technology, it's really the like sort of imaginative pathways that reading fiction and the thinking about things in this way kind of open up of where will things that seem sort of when Snow Crash was written, a lot of this stuff didn't seem like it was going to happen in our lifetimes. Now, these things are sort of real. Are there any kind of pieces of fiction that doesn't have to be a book, but it could be a movie or a television show that have come out recently that you like, that sort of illustrate some of these issues and maybe show some of the potential risks that moving in a direction of more kind of technological integration with humanity can bring? I think a lot of dystopian science fiction kind of shows what happens when things go too far, and that's worth keeping in mind. But I'm curious, beyond the sort of older classics, if there's anything more recent that you're a big fan of.
It's funny. I watch all the Black Mirror episodes, and there was one super creepy one where uh, the fast food restaurant installed an AI in the headsets of the workers at the fast food restaurant, and it started out innocuously, kind of over the shoulder, coaching them to be more efficient. But eventually, that AI got so intrusive and abusive towards the humans that they fired all the humans and took over. So that was the dystopian side. Um, and it's funny to me because last month we got approached by a fast food chain who wanted to do the same thing, but in a good way. So it's funny when you see something in science fiction that kind of inspires you, but when you see the dystopian side, it's also a little creepy, and it's a reminder that let's not go that route. Let's do this in a good way.
Yeah,
So
and I think that the scary part is, like, we could have voice-based AI kind of avatars when we go to the store, when we're trying to get somewhere in our car, when we're fixing our blender or something like that. But then this sort of the dystopian side is like we're no longer interacting with people, we're no longer in the real world. And I think it's important to have people that are thinking very conscientiously about these issues and about these sort of risks as they're building these kind of products and services. So my
well,
final question, and it's quite a broad one, is why do you think that AI based um, AI based voice systems are the future?
well, so this also kind of ties in with your last question. Uh, Let me use a fast food example. When I drive to a Burger King, doesn't happen very often, but I always ask them to leave the onions off of my burger. And about half the time they get that right. So that person is making minimum wage, and maybe they're not dreaming of being the person behind a fast food system. Maybe it's a college person who wants to be a teacher or a lawyer or something, and so their heart's not completely in getting my order right. We could totally do that. We could replace that person with an AI system that would get that request for no onions on the burger. We could do that right every single time. Now, the press has kind of seized on this notion that AI is evil and that it wants to take jobs. Um, when we first started working in the medical space, people would ask me about, do you think you can replace a doctor? And my response is, I don't want to replace a doctor. The doctor is the strongest part of your medical service. As a patient, you need that doctor to be there for you. But there are a lot of tasks that are boring or tedious for a doctor, such as interviewing you and taking in your personal data and your street address and all that. We can automate that. But there's also other tasks that are really nearly impossible for a medical team to do, such as keeping an eye on you 24/7. Maybe you just got discharged from the hospital, and our AI system could keep watch and interact with you. Daniel, did you take your medicine? I think you're a little bit late for your 2 o'clock pills, or whatever. And if there is a problem, then alert that health team. So doing things that are hard or boring or impossible for human teams to do is, I think, the highest calling for the AIs that we're making. Uh, we began 2 years ago working with vending machine companies right at the beginning of the COVID outbreak. There was an industry stat that said people were creeped out by touching vending machines. They didn't want to touch the buttons because they didn't want to get sick from that. 85% of the people in the US didn't want to touch the buttons anymore. So a voice system was a natural way to use our AI interfaces in a new environment for us and serve an important need, such as just being able to use your voice to say, I'd like a COVID mask, I'd like some hand sanitizer, and it would just appear there for you. So those are the things that I'm excited about. serving needs that are real and underserved.
And your point about a doctor, you can have AI that can sort of go through the process of, I'm describing my symptoms, my shoulder hurts, and I have this and this, and they can do on some level similar calculations to what a doctor is doing. But an AI chatbot or avatar can't, put their hand on your shoulder and reassure you after, a tough diagnosis, or they can't talk to your family when you're undergoing an exam, and that kind of balancing, the ability to deal with tedious tasks with, also not removing the human element is like it, or incorporating the human element into that is fascinating challenge. And I'm really excited to see what SapientX has in store in the next couple of years.
I really like the talking cat that we're developing called Hazel. And Hazel can talk to you and keep track of your health stats. I wish you could pet Hazel. We'll never be able to do that in a very good way. But remember that we have a close family relationship with our friends who make robots.
Mhm.
And the little robots that are being made right now are struggling to find usefulness in a home. And a lot of the early robot companies went out of business because they just couldn't find a strong usefulness. But if we can pair our strong AI with their strong robot designs, I think we're going to see a next generation of robots that actually do find strong utilities within your home, whether they're serious things or just being super entertaining. We're talking with a company in San Diego right now that wants to make very humorous robots. So let's have that. It's a great area for us to work in.
And having as much experimentation and as many different companies trying different things, throwing ideas at the wall, seeing what sticks is it's a good, very exciting time to be kind of observing and working in this space.
Absolutely. So I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me today, and I'm looking forward to engaging with people who might want to join our team as investors. You can do that by simply going to Start Engine and looking for SapientX there. And remember that if you go to our website, there's an email link there. And if you ask questions, I'll make sure you have an answer within 24 hours. That's my commitment to you. So I appreciate you taking all this time with us today. And I know your day is busy, so thanks for spending part of it with us.
Yeah, and thank you all for coming to listen. Or if you're watching on YouTube, thank you for watching. This is this was a great conversation, and thank you again for coming on, David. I thought this is, and being able to talk about the company and also about some of the more kind of abstract and but really fascinating kind of questions about science fiction and technology and the future of humanity in a sense is it's always a pleasure.
Thank you so much, Daniel. I appreciate your time today too.